everybody. This is Ryan McClanahan with history3cards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. So, I have an amazing story to tell you guys. I recently came across a card I've never actually seen, and actually, I don't own it either. It's a card of Ted Healy, the Three Stooges' first manager, and it looks like this. So growing up, my father introduced me to the Three Stooges and a lot of black and white film noir movies from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, along with Star Trek and Car 54, Where Are You, and Gilligan's Island, and Get Smart. And basically, it was everything that he used to watch as a kid. And so I started to watch them as well. And I really enjoyed the Three Stooges. I'm not sure if there's a kid alive who hasn't seen the Three Stooges. Maybe like the younger generations haven't seen them yet. However, I wasn't really aware of Ted Healy, their first manager, and I want to tell you a little bit about him and his amazing story. Um, so, Ted Healy was born Ernest L. Nash in 1896 in Kaufman, Texas. And it wasn't until 1908 when the family moved from Texas to Brooklyn, New York. Um, and it's where he met a kid by the name of Moses Horowitz. And Horowitz would later on go on to be um, Mo Howard. Anyway, they were actually really good friends, and they joined a vaudeville act by the name of Annette Kellerman's Diving Girls. And I, I guess this is around 1912 or so. And you can look up Annette Kellerman on Wikipedia and kind of get a view of what she was all about because she's got kind of an interesting story herself. Um, I really thought it was kind of interesting. Uh, I didn't really know a whole lot about um, vaudeville, and the Diving Girls kind of reminded me of a TV show called Pushing Daisies with the ants there with their stick, the darling mermaid darlings. Anyway, if you haven't seen that show, it's a pretty good show. I really enjoyed it. Um, that show ended really quickly though, and then I guess what happened was that Mo Howard or Horowitz at that time still. He really needed to get a job, and he went and got a 9 to 5. But later on in his life, he always kind of said that he couldn't hold down a job to save his life, and so this would actually come back in the 1920s, where Howard was in and out of the Three Stooges. Um, and I really kind of also wanted to find out what vaudeville was because I've always heard about it, um, but I wasn't sure if it was a part of the movie theater, part of the stage, or what. So as it turned out, it was started in France in the early 1880s, about 1882 or so, and it featured burlesque comedy and songs and dancing. So that's kind of fits in right where Ted Healy and the Three Stooges fit. Um, and there's a lot of actors who actually made a transition from um, vaudeville to the movies, the silver screen, if you will. And a few of them are really kind of well known. You got Charlie Chaplin, Milton Berle, Mickey Rooney, Don Amici. But the thing is, by the early 1930s, nobody was going to vaudeville acts, and it really kind of died in the early 30s, and as more and more of the actors ended up on the silver screen. So it was a little over 10 years later that the earliest incarnation of the Three Stooges took place in about 1922 at the time, um, Healy ends up getting married to a Betty Brown, who is a dancer, after a week of dating. And, I don't recommend that. I'm not a dating coach, but I don't think that can go well. Um, and so uh, that ended up, that marriage ended up in divorce in 1932, which is pretty long for an actor. Anyway, uh, he then tried for wife number two, and that was, let me see if I wrote down some notes here, and that was uh, Betty Hickman, who was a college student, and they got married on May 15th, 1936, after one date. And again, I'm not a marriage coach or a life coach, but I think that would kind of destroy your life. It could very well go badly for both involved. I do not recommend it at all. Um, However, a son was born on December 17th, 1937. His name was John. And I actually do remember an interview that he gave probably, probably 10 plus years ago, in which he had talked about his father, uh, Ted Healy, and this is the first instance I actually knew about Ted Healy. So I've always been kind of interested afterwards in finding out what happened, because I knew something had happened, but I wasn't sure what it was. And uh, uh, over the last couple of years, I've been kind of trying to dig into this case to see exactly what transpired. And this is what I've really come up with. A lot of it's kind of circumstantial evidence, because there is no hardcore evidence to go on. But it is probably the weirdest case I've heard in a long time. But then again, Hollywood is considered Holly weird, and this really fits the bill. Ted Healy was really adept at finding young talent, and he actually supported a lot of young actors coming up through Hollywood. And I was kind of surprised to hear some of the names that he helped influence or get parts for. And some of those are, let's see, Jean Harlow, Clark Gable, Joan Crawford, Gary Cooper, and Marion Davies. Now, they all started out in the 1920s, but some of them, like Clark Gable, he really made a splash with a movie called It Happened One Night from 1934. And I did see that movie growing up. I liked it quite a bit. And the thing is, uh, all these actors and actresses that I just mentioned pretty much started out in um, comedic roles, and it was actually a very safe thing to do back in the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s to end up in comedy and then kind of branch out into other different genres like I don't know, crime or drama or whatever the case may be, or westerns, as Gary Cooper did a lot of westerns. I'm not a big fan of westerns at all. I think the last western I saw was 310 to Yuma. That movie, It Happened One Night, was kind of a sleeper, and they weren't expecting anything to happen with it. And then that movie actually ended up winning 5 Oscars, and I think it's the maybe the first of 3 movies in the 20th century to actually have won 5 Oscars. So, um, if you haven't seen that movie, guys, check it out because it is pretty good. I think it's a pre-code movie as well. And at some point, I'm going to get into the stupid Hays Code. Um, and I think that there's some really interesting stuff going on with Will Hayes too. Uh, anyway, getting back onto Ted Healy. So, um, Ted Healy, he actually did a contract with, I believe it's MGM, and there's a movie that he did called Soup to Nuts, and it debuted in September 28th, 1930, with the Three Stooges. Um, and it's, I think, one of the first appearances of the Stooges, with, I think, Larry Fine as well. Um, but uh, it also has Rube Goldberg in it as well, and he was the writer of the movie. Now, I always heard about the name Rube Goldberg, specifically the Rube Goldberg contraption, and I didn't know what that was. And apparently, what it is, it's a complicated machine to perform simple tasks. But a lot of people um, kind of mentioned the Rube Goldberg machine or Rube Goldberg contraption, and that's where that comes from because he was an inventor and a writer as well in Hollywood. Um, but the thing what happened with this movie was that it caused some friction, and I think also there was a fourth Stooge as well in this movie, and I think his name was Fred Sanborn, but he left after the production of the movie to concentrate on his music career, and so during this time in the late 1920s and early 1930s, you have a few other members of the Ted Healy's Stooges, and I think there was actually a few other names associated too. So uh, what would go on was that one person would leave, and another, and then Healy would bring on somebody else, and I think he may have actually brought on somebody named Paul Mousy Garner, and he was, I think later on he was supposed to be a replacement for another Stooge, and unfortunately I didn't write down who that was. I think maybe it was Curly when, yeah, he had passed away in 1952. Unfortunately, I think he had a few strokes going back to 1946. However, Mo Howard said absolutely not. I don't want to work with this guy at all. But Mousy Garner actually had a very long career in vaudeville and in the uh, movie industry as well, and he served in World War II with distinction as well. So uh, anyway, um, I think, oh, he was actually supposed to replace Shemp in 1956, and Shemp actually was in the very beginning stages of the Three Stooges, and I think he left, and he actually had a very successful solo career besides the Stooges. But I think Shemp was actually one of my favorite Stooges, and it's really kind of too bad what happened to those guys. Actually, there was a movie that I remember seeing not too long ago. It was a Three Stooges made for TV movie that came out in 2000 with an actor by the name of Paul Ben Victor, who is kind of going over his life in 1959, and it's told from his perspective. After the Three Stooges are no longer, and they're thinking of actually bringing them back in 1959. And that's probably the year that a lot of baby boomers would actually have seen the Three Stooges, and then including my father, and it just brought back a different generation to enjoy these movies and these actors. And the thing that was really kind of successful about the Three Stooges was their slapstick comedy, and that was due to Ted Healy. Um, and from what I've heard, there was a lot of injuries from people who were trying to attempt to, emulate these guys. I think at one point, even Curly got injured pretty severely by a fan who was um, emulating him and poked him in the eye. So it's something that I've always heard about, and it's something I wouldn't actually think that you should do is try to do what they did. They were professionals. Thing is, with those guys, that you'd have scripts written for them, but they would really never go with their scripts. They would always change certain things on the fly, and that can be really hard to do sometimes. But they were pretty adept. And if you have to remember that, you know, Mo, Larry, and Curly, they had been doing this for years and years and years, and I'm sure they practiced quite a bit too. Um, so here's where we get into the night of. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Ted Healy's finances because it's kind of interesting. Um, Healy, right after Soup to Nuts came out, he got into a fight, a contractual fight with the Stooges, and I guess what happened was it was over money. Obviously, a lot of fights are over money, especially in Hollywood. Um, but he tried to sue the Three Stooges um, over using his material, and it, it it was basically over copyright. And the thing that he didn't understand or he didn't know about was that the Three Stooges, at least Mo Howard and Larry Fine and maybe Sanborn. I'm not sure. I'm not sure when Curly actually joined the Three Stooges. Um, however, they they were contracted by the Schubert Theater, which actually owned their material that the Three Stooges were using. So um, when Healy sued them, he lost because they weren't using his material, but they had permission from the Schubert Theater. But it left some pretty hard feelings. And that wasn't the only time that there was some fighting going on between Healy and Mo Howard and the other Stooges. And eventually, Healy left, and then the Three Stooges went on to do their own thing, and that was about I think 1934 or so, and I think that was also the same time that they used to do their two reel shorts, and there was a one of them. I think the first one was Malice in the Palace. I haven't seen this one in a long time, so after this, I'm probably going to go and check it out. I do have a couple of copies of their stuff, and as I remember a few years ago, somebody actually produced a lot of the Three Stooges movies in color, which I think is a really neat aspect to watching the Three Stooges. Now, well, there's something about black and white movies that I find really interesting, especially with the film noir stuff, because it's all about lighting and shadows, and it can really do a great job. There was actually a movie several years ago called The Good German with George Clooney that is in black and white. And if you haven't seen that, guys, go check that one out because that is a fantastic movie. Anyway, getting back again to Ted Healy. So, um, on uh, what is it? December, sorry, December 19th and 20th of 1937. Um, Healy is pretty sick, and it's there's a few things here that don't really kind of make sense in the rest of the story. So I had to kind of piece things together through circumstantial evidence, and um, the beginning, everybody kind of says that on these two dates that he was sick. Now, where it kind of differs is if he was sick from the flu or if he was sick because he was getting over a hangover. The thing is with Ted Healy is he's an all-star Flint Rim drunk. He loves his bottle very much, and that's the source of a lot of his problems going forward. Um, he at one point is greeted by an executive from MGM. They want to check in on one of their top stars and make sure he's okay, which they have a lot of money invested in Ted Healy, and so that makes a lot of sense. The MGM exec has somebody else there to look in on him and says to that person, "Whatever you do, guys, don't um, don't take your eye off this guy, and keep him in his room." And so Healy sneaks out and he grabs a cab. And some sources say he goes to another bar, and then other sources say that he goes directly to this place called the Trocadero nightclub or the Trocadero Cafe. Now, I'm not sure entirely what the difference is between a cafe and a nightclub. Here in Boston in the 1930s, we didn't have nightclubs. However, this is where things get really out of hand very, very fast. So Healy's at the Trocadero about 11 o'clock or so. You guys know a physical altercation with what eyewitnesses had said were three college kids from UCLA. How they knew that they were UCLA college kids, I'm not sure. This incident is supposed to have taken place on a Tuesday. Like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I think from the investigator's standpoint, it probably didn't either. More likely it happened on a Saturday or even a Sunday. However, um, the eyewitnesses said that Healy walked out with the men onto the side street, and a fight ensued. Others say that there was a fight inside the club itself, and then they came outside and continued to fight. Somebody threw a punch at Healy, um, and he went home. And I guess he was met with his doctor, and he ended up having a heart attack and died. And the next thing, and there's the coroner's report. Healy's physician refused to sign it, and the coroner and the physician got into a pretty heated argument. Um, and so uh, the coroner apparently said that Healy had died from natural causes. Uh, Whatever the case may be, this is kind of strange because uh, at 41 years old, I don't know too many people who die of natural causes. Um, it's I think kind of unusual. And then the alcohol most likely did not help at all. And the other thing about this was really strange was that the coroner and the doctor both noticed there was a huge welt on one side of his face, and he had cuts and bruises. And that would kind of indicate that the natural causes was nixed. It shouldn't have been. However, that's what the coroner wrote down. There's another story as well, and this actually happens to come from Sam Wolf, uh, a friend and coworker of Healy's. Um, and I'm not sure exactly where Sam Wolf fits in all of this. I'd like to know that. There is a book about this, and I haven't read the book. And this is really kind of in dispute as well. The following. So um, as I go as I go through my notes, um, so the three actors you have Wallace Beery, Pat DeCiso. I think that's how you pronounce his name. DeCiso was a he was an executive, I think, with MGM, and then Albert Broccoli. And Albert Broccoli, I'm aware of because he was the producer of James Bond movies back in the 1960s and 70s. And so, anyway, uh, it was said that this incident occurred with these three actors, and it was Healy who started to get mouthy and throw a couple of punches their way, and that's when they asked either the staff or these three gentlemen asked Healy to step outside and then deal with it outside instead. Um, anyway, I have a couple of I don't have any problems with this. So some people have said that the timing is in dispute, especially with Wallace Beery. First off, you can make a pretty convincing argument for and against Wallace Beery actually being at the Trocadero at that time. After the incident, it's been said that Beery left for a trip to um, Europe, and so he was out of the press. The other two guys were in the press. There's a lot of um, articles at the time on these two guys, and if my bet, if anybody threw a punch at Healy, my bet is it's Pat DeCiso. DeCiso and Broccoli were cousins, and they would probably stick up for one another, is my guess. Um, at least that's what I've known cousins to do. Me having cousins, I do stick up for them all the time, uh, even if I did something wrong as a kid. Anyway, um, there is something really strange about Pat DeCiso, and he does have a very sordid history, which is probably why um, people have looked at him specifically. Now, the thing with Albert Broccoli, and I'll get to DeCiso in a minute, but the thing with Albert Broccoli was that he did lie to police. Um, he said at first that he hit Healy in the face. He punched him in the face, and that's where the bruising and the welting came in. But he then changed his story and said that Healy was knocked down, but he didn't punch him, and he wasn't struck in the face. Um, So, Broccoli, I guess, was that was it for him. He skated, he walked. The other guy, Pat DeCiso, is really kind of an interesting character because he has a history of boxing women, I should say, and it was in February of 1937 that he gets into a fist fight with let me see if I wrote down. I'm pretty sure I did. Again, when you write notes, just make sure that your notes are in order. And this is something that I have not really mastered as a writer. He gets into a fist fight at the Clover Club with the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, a guy named Dan Topping. And what what happened was that DeCiso may or may not have been dating the girl that Topping was with, and he said some derogatory remarks towards Topping, and fists were flown. And this is actually in the press. And so there was a quote that one of the onlookers saw, and I wrote down the quote, but I'll be writing about this anyway, so in greater detail. I'm just kind of giving you the Cliff's notes or my notes version of this story. Uh, what happened was Topping really punched him in the eye, got him good, and DeCiso ended up running out of the Clover Club, and that was kind of it. Um, it was kind of an amazing thing. The thing that I think is interesting is that it wasn't that long before that incident that DeCiso was involved in an altercation with his ex-wife Thelma Todd, and Thelma Todd is a Massachusetts native. I forget exactly where. I didn't write it down, but she had filed for divorce in, I think, 1934 with him. They had gotten married in 1932, and she had said that there were problems. They actually got in a pretty big altercation at the Trocadero nightclub. It was a big altercation, and a lot of people saw it. And and then not too long after that, I believe that she had passed away mysteriously, as people had said, even in the press. Thelma Todd starts out her career in comedy as well, and it wouldn't be a stretch for her to actually have known or bumped into Ted Healy. She's actually uh, starring in roles with the Marx Brothers and Buster Keaton, and she has a role in the 1931 version of the Maltese Falcon, which is the first version of the book. The book actually came out in, I believe, 1930, and this version stars Ricardo Cortez, and he's in the 1928 Will's Cinema Stars set, and I think he has a few other cards as well, but he's in the Humphrey Bogart role, and Humphrey Bogart really makes the Maltese Falcon in 1942. Uh, both both movies are fantastic. I actually kind of like the 1931 version a little bit better, but if as a side note, if you're gonna try to find Humphrey Bogart's stuff, his cards, he doesn't have too many. I think maybe a 1948 Kellogg's Pep and maybe another one that's not. I think it's from Spain. Anyway, her death is, even today, it is really kind of something that is still looked at. She was said to have been on some kind of narcotics through her husband, and she ended up one day um, sucking on fumes, if you will. Died of carbon monoxide poisoning in her car, and she had a mink coat on and jewelry. But the thing is that the coroner ruled it a self-offing, and the investigators said that there was no evidence of self-offing at all, right? So that's where the inconsistencies in that uh, start, and then on top of it, she's also seeing Lucky Luciano as well, and who knows what he was involved in, and I don't think it was anything all that great, to tell you the truth. And so I think maybe if she was on some kind of narcotics or drugs, it was from Lucky Luciano, who is a well-known tradesman in that. And so um, that has always been something of a suspect death. And I'm not sure if DeCiso had anything to do with that, but he was testifying under oath in a court case, you know, about this. I haven't read any of the transcripts, and I'm not sure where I can find those. I would like to check them out if they are available. Um, and then so after that, DeCiso ends up marrying a 17-year-old Gloria Vanderbilt, and I didn't know a whole lot about Gloria Vanderbilt except I think the jeans. Anyway, yeah, fashion is not my strong suit, I guess, especially in 1940s fashion. Anyway, so she marries him in 1941, and they get divorced in 1945, and she says basically the same thing, that he abused her quite often, and I think she called. I think what a lot of people have said, that he calls women fatsy Roo, which okay, you're 37-year-old guy calling a teenage girl Fatsy Roo. Okay, like, grow up, will you? Um, anyway, so they get divorced, and then he marries another girl, and and she basically says the same thing, that she's being abused by him, and he actually at some point during World War II, DeCiso ends up in the Army Air Corps, and he's teaching at I think a flight school in California, and that's really kind of the end of him as a Hollywood exec. By 1946. He's out of Hollywood, and I think he died in 1978. But um, Ira Broccoli was never really, nobody was charged. There was really no investigation other than what the investigators initially stated. It was any kind of grand jury was dropped, and I think the grand jury was convened in the Healy case. But this brings me back to a guy named Eddie Mannix, and Eddie Mannix is really he's suspect for a few other reasons. Um, the first time I heard about Eddie Mannix was in a movie called Hollywoodland with Ben Affleck, and Ben Affleck stars as a, um, a guy named George Reeves, who is the first Superman, and George Reeves ends up dating or seeing Eddie Mannix's wife, and he ends up dead in 1958, and or I think it's 58 or 59. Anyway, um, and there's all sorts of suspicions around this death because Eddie Mannix, his first wife, filed for divorce or said she was going to file it for divorce, and then 2 weeks later she ends up mysteriously dead in a car crash. And so Eddie Mannix is actually involved in this case as a cleaner. And a lot of people have kind of suggested that he was the one who bought off the coroner and maybe bought off the police um, investigators and everybody else in the Trocadero nightclub. And I'm not sure. This probably could be true, if you think about it, Wallace Beery is one of the highest paid actors at the time, and he's making a ton of money for Hollywood. And this would have been a huge scandal had it been actually true that Healy ended up dying at the hands of either one of these actors. Um, it wouldn't be it wouldn't look good at all, and it would probably cost Hollywood a lot of money. So uh, there is a part of this that seems very plausible, especially when you consider um, um, either broccoli or, in fact, I think um, Pat DeCiso, he probably had a lot to do with this. And then you have Eddie Mannix too, and his background is very suspect. Even if Eddie Mannix was not really physically involved in it, um, I could probably see that he would fix this and threaten people and all that because I think he was that kind of a guy. In any case, guys, I found this really very interesting, and this is really kind of a different part of, I guess, history through cards, if you will, because this is kind of like direct history, um, and it's about Hollywood, and Holly Weird is just that. It's a very strange place. I think even today, but the one thing I've kind of discovered studying vintage Hollywood, if you will, is that people have you know been excommunicated, if you will, from society in very strange ways in Hollywood. What usually goes on in Hollywood doesn't happen in other places, and that's because I think everybody's insulated and connected in some way or fashion or form, and so. Um, I'll probably get to the Three Stooges individually because they do have a set from 1959 Flair, which is very popular, and the Three Stooges remain popular to this day. I was just really surprised that Healy actually has a tobacco card, and that's the one thing about the hobby, which I'm still, kind of like I'm in the vintage hobby, only because I think that there are cards that I've never seen before, and I never know what I'm going to come up with next. And that's one of the exciting things about the hobby. And aside from, you never know also who you're going to meet as well. And I've met a lot of great people through even my interactions on YouTube. And so, with that, guys, thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate it. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you later and have a good one. Bye. Thank you.